Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second episode of the Pro Show here on the Grizzly Cub Network. I'm your host for today's episode, Jayce Miller. Usually it's Thomas Crow and Brian Powers. But today I'm joined with a Middle Tennessee football play-by-play commentator and a writer for, I believe is it Alton Sports? Is that right, Jake?
Athlon Sports. Yeah,
Athlon. All
Athlon.
right. It's Jake Rose,
Throw the H
everybody.
in there.
Yes, Athlon. So, Jake
Thanks for
Rose.
having me, buddy.
No problem. Thank you. Before we get started and stuff, I just want to again say thank you for joining and stuff. We wanted to know what you do, how you got to where you are and everything. So my first question is, how did you get into the commentary and broadcasting as a whole? Like, did you do it in high school or college or wherever?
Yeah, so ever since I was probably 8 years old, broadcasting's all I've ever really wanted to do. I started in high school. I got lucky enough to where I did grow up in Franklin, Indiana. However, I did go to Roncalli High School on the south side, but I was lucky enough to be a part of the Rebel Media Network. They had just started when I think I had either just graduated. Yeah, I think I was a senior, and they were live streaming audio of like baseball games, softball games, freshman football games. So my buddy Bo Browning and I, we were part of the first Rebel Network, Rebel Media Network broadcast, and we had no idea what we were doing. Then a couple years later, we both end up at Ball State University together, and we had our own radio show, our own sports talk radio show. Again, no idea what we were doing. It was called Bo and the Bench Warmer. I was obviously the bench warmer, harkening back to my high school basketball days. I bounced around schools a couple of times. I switched majors. I was a history major for a little while. Went to the University of Alabama for a hot second as a freshman. Ended up down in Nashville about 8 years ago. Finished my degree at Middle Tennessee State University and got my degree in broadcast journalism. So I was doing a lot of morning news shows for the local or the school's TV network, MT10. Got started that way. And then I kind of got lucky because at the time I had moved to Nashville, I had just started writing for Athlon Sports covering baseball. And they needed somebody to go on the road for the first baseball series of the season. And it was like in February, it was in Jacksonville. And the guy that was in charge of the Blue Raider Media Network, he asked me if I could do it. And so I just got lucky, honestly, falling in. That's all I've ever really wanted to do, and it's kind of taken off from there.
Right. No, I'm kind of right there with you. I've always wanted to do stuff like that, and like here and stuff, we have live streams for our sporting events, and like
Yeah,
just last week, my friend and I we called the Franklin versus Whiteland football game. So I don't know.
yeah, I
You
saw
might
some
know
clips
about
of
that.
that. That's awesome, you guys. I would have killed to have that as a high school student, and just by having that program, you guys are already light years ahead of so many other people that you're going to meet in college. So that's really cool that you guys are able to do this.
Right. So when you went to Ball State, was that
Mm-hmm.
before you changed to a history? Did you go for broadcasting and journalism like you did at Middle Tennessee?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I was a telecommunications major, and I was there the very first semester that they had opened up the David Letterman building for telecommunications. Everything was brand new, state of the art, brand new radio station, TV station. I did not get involved in TV at the time. I was probably a little too young and mostly immature to kind of hone in on my skills and studies and things like that. But no, Ball State was a good experience, at least in terms of getting my feet wet, in terms of realizing like how much work I actually had to do to actually be
Right.
good at anything involving being on air. And it was also a really good foundation for just kind of understanding media and like the changing media landscape. And I learned a lot about that through a bunch of different classes that I took at Ball State.
All right. Right on. Right on. So moving on, like from your career and stuff, I know you do on ESPN3 and ESPN Plus. You do the Middle Tennessee
Mm-hmm.
sports, like so you're still with Middle Tennessee. I
Yeah.
also saw on your Twitter you're a big fan of MLB and baseball as a whole and the NFL.
Yeah.
Along
Yeah.
with your writing and stuff, I know that. Do you ever plan on trying to call an MLB or any type of pro sports game?
I'm working on it, man. It is a hyper competitive business I've been lucky enough to have the Middle Tennessee job. I think this is my 7th football season, and it'll be my 8th basketball season coming up. I'm 33 years old. I feel lucky enough just to have those jobs, to be a younger broadcaster and be calling Division I basketball and football and baseball is pretty special, I think. But I think, for me, a lot of people would be cool with having that, but I am trying to work my way up, and I've interviewed with some pretty big networks and trying to take that next step. But it is very, very competitive. I have a lot of friends that do broadcasting at a higher level, and it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, and it is hyper competitive. But yeah, that's the goal, man, is to end up on a network someday, hopefully soon.
Yes. It'd be nice to see, even like you said, lucky to work with ESPN and stuff. I think that's even big enough. But
yeah, it took me when we first got the ESPN contract a few years ago with Middle. It was very, very surreal saying and you're watching college basketball on ESPN. I was like, did I just say that? I know it's ESPN3, it's ESPN Plus, it's all streaming and online and everything. It's not on, broadcast television, but it was just very cool to just be able to say ESPN.
Right. No, I get it. I know with Middle Tennessee, was that your first job you took out of college and stuff?
Yeah, pretty much, man. So when I moved here, I didn't have to Nashville 8 years ago. I didn't have a job. I didn't know anybody. I didn't really have a plan. I ended up working, at a car dealership in Brentwood, which is just south of Nashville. Realized I hated it. Realized I needed to get back to school and do what I wanted to do. So, I actually work, after I graduated, I got a job working full-time at the Tennessee General Assembly. So my full-time job is working for the House Clerk's office here in that building.
Gotcha.
Tennessee State Capitol. So that's why I have a very yellow office. I didn't paint it, but this is my office in the Capitol, inside the House chamber. So I'm lucky enough to have this job.
Wow.
And they're flexible enough to let me travel when I need to for broadcasting, or take a day off or two to get some work done broadcasting as well. So I'm very, very lucky to have both. So I've kind of got my feet in a couple of different arenas.
Right. So I mean, I'm kind of the same with you right now, because I also do PA announcing for, it's kind of oddball out there, but for demolition derbies and monster trucks.
Yeah.
And dirt track racing and autocross racing and all stuff.
That's awesome.
This upcoming weekend out in Terre Haute, Indiana, I'm doing a weekend-long demolition derby, and I'm the PA announcer for it. So
that's great.
I just wanted to know, from Middle Tennessee, if I'm saying it right, is it Murfreesboro, Tennessee?
Yeah. So there's actually a funny John Mulaney bit on this when he was on a late night show. He couldn't say Murfreesboro, right? So people kind of take out that second R after the F, and it's just Murfreesboro,
right,
instead of Murfreesboro. But I think technically it is Murfreesboro, but no one ever says it right. It's just, whenever I'm on air, I just call it the borough. I never, I just
better
don't even want to risk it.
That than mess it up, right?
Yeah.
So how different is it down there from being growing up in, Franklin, Indiana and stuff?
Yeah, man. People always ask me, because I don't have a Southern accent or anything, they ask me where I'm from. And I always say I'm from Indiana, and they always ask me, what do I miss most about being away from home? And honestly, for me, it's basketball season. I know winters aren't always the most fun back in Indiana, but I miss the snow. But I miss basketball season. I do most of my broadcasts during the year are basketball games, doing men's and women's games. I'll do 2 to 3 a week. But then I also do state championship high school games for the private schools down here. And it's just a totally different atmosphere. Back home, basketball, no matter where you're from in the state of Indiana, it's the most popular thing in your hometown. I remember growing up in Franklin, we would go to games at what's now the middle school, but the gym that was the high school at the time,
right,
it'd be packed. It'd be a Tuesday night, a Thursday night, Saturday night, and it would just be jam packed. Here it's just a little different. It's much more of a football state. So I miss people love basketball down here, mostly in Memphis, but it's just different, just kind of a different vibe. So I definitely miss basketball season. So one of my big goals is hopefully if things work out is to be able to come home and call a game at Hinkle Fieldhouse or at Assembly Hall or you know, anywhere back home, big time college game or even, you know, Pacer game someday. That'd be pretty cool. So, and it's funny, when I moved here, I didn't really think about what it would be like to not have a basketball season in Indiana, and
Right.
I miss it, man. It's just a different vibe.
It is. I mean, like they say, in 49 other states, it's just basketball, but Indiana
That's right.
is different.
Yeah, and
so.
you know what, man? That is true. That is so true.
All right. Kind of moving from the broadcasting scene and stuff. So, like we mentioned, you're a writer for Athlon. I'll say it right this time. Athlon Sports. And
Yep, you got it.
how different is that, like writing journalism and stuff? How different is that from play-by-play?
You know, honestly, it's not as different as you might think. I do a lot of NFL game previews, and it's basically the same way that I would approach my play-by-play. You know, in play-by-play, you actually have your stats and your notes and things, but you also have to be able to tell a story. So when I tell my stories in play-by-play, you only have a finite amount of time. So you have to basically start with your opening line and then everything that you would to support it. If you're telling a story or if you're using stats or notes to prove a point of why something is important in a game. It's kind of the same thing when I write about the NFL, if I write about Major League Baseball. If I say the Giants are going to win the World Series, well, I better be able to have something to back that up. So then all of my research that I've done, my notes, would be the focus points behind that. Just like in play-by-play, if I'm saying Jayce Miller is the best three-point shooter in Franklin High School history, I better have some stats and notes and maybe a quote to back that up. So really, it's very, very similar in terms of you know, how you prove a point and how you get your thoughts across and how you get them across in a timely and pointed manner. So yeah, I think there are definitely some similarities. The way I take notes on how I prep for an NFL column and between how I prep for a football game really aren't that different.
Right. So, like in high school and stuff with that, were you like big into like the English classes or like the writing classes and stuff?
Yeah, man, I've always been a big literature, and I love to read. And if that's one thing that I can encourage anybody watching this that has any hopes of being a broadcaster at all, like if you want to be on TV, if you want to be on radio, you need to read every day. I wake up every morning and I get the actual New York Times delivered to my house, not on my computer, but like an actual physical, living, breathing newspaper. And I just flip through and read basically the opening, the front section every morning. And not only does that make me, you know, more in tune of what's happening in the world, but like it keeps you sharp. It keeps your brain on a point. And I usually have to read a lot for my job anyway, my full-time job anyway, but there's also a ton of reading in game prep, in prep for writing for different articles. But I also just enjoy reading books outside of work as well. So that's my biggest piece of advice. Always be reading because it keeps you sharp and because it just makes you more intellectual, more worldly. You're able to have more conversations about things with different kinds of people. And it just makes you a much more well-rounded person to talk about anything.
Right. So, like, and I bet it's so much easier to write, like with the journalism stuff, write about something you're passionate about. So, because, like,
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I've had that struggle sometimes in, like, classes, like, if I know nothing about a topic or if I'm not passionate about it, it's more of a struggle. But if it's something I'm really passionate about, it's more.
Yeah, it's like when you're a high
more.
school teacher. I don't know if you guys do book reports in high school anymore, but like we had to do reports and stuff, middle school and high school, and when we had to do one of like a random president, and you're like, why do I need to know about Millard Fillmore? Like,
Right. So, between the two, do you have a favorite between play-by-play and journalism, or do you feel the same, or what?
So I love writing. I'm very passionate about writing and reading, but I think I love broadcasting just a little bit more. Even if I make it to the big time in broadcasting, I still want to have a presence in writing, whether that's for Athlon or for whomever else has a columnist or something. I think it's just very important to be able to, one, I just feel like one helps me better at the other. And I'm just kind of passionate about both. So I do love being on TV a little more. Maybe that's just my ego. I don't know. But I don't know. I just think there's something to be said about writers. I guess I'm just kind of romantic about being able to hold up a book or being able to hold up a newspaper and consuming information that way.
Right. No, I totally get that and understand. I like you said, I like being in front of the camera too. I love talking. That's why I do the announcing stuff.
It's kind of addicting after a while, isn't it?
Yeah. So, with that, so you said you've been doing it for 7 to 8 years with Middle Tennessee and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most like memorable thing you've ever called or even like wrote about in journalism?
So this is probably 5 years ago, I think, maybe 4 years ago. Athlon asked me to cover the World Series and basically write about every single game. I didn't get to go to the World Series, but basically that was like the first time that I had ever really been put on a strict deadline of where like I have to do a game recap every night and then do like a preview for the next game. And like kind of give my thoughts and opinions and things like that. That was like my first foray into actually being like a journalist and not just some guy that writes for this magazine every now and again. But that was pretty cool just because it got a lot of run. I did kind of a Where Are They Now piece on the 1986 Mets, which ESPN just did a 30 for 30 on last night actually. And Sports Illustrated picked it up. That was pretty cool. I'll kind of forget about that one every now and again. But yeah, in terms of broadcasting, I think it's really fun to do the state championship games that I've been doing just because, for a lot of those kids, that's like the last time they're going to play ball. And that's going to be a real, I don't want to say a defining moment in their lives, but, a moment that they're never, ever going to forget. Perhaps the highlight of their adolescence, and I get to be a part of that, and I think that's pretty cool. I did get to do an ESPN showcase game this past spring in March out in February for the two best high school basketball teams in the country. Oh, wow. We had a lot of people watch that. That's the biggest broadcast I've ever done, and that was really cool. That was honestly probably the best broadcast I had ever done too. So I kind of got lucky with that one, but yeah, I'd say those three things.
Right. So all great things. Moving on just a tad bit, or closing out really, I believe that might be all the questions I really have for you, unless there's anything else you want to talk about, or if anything I can think of. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
No, man, like I said, I think this is great that you guys have this opportunity in high school to really kind of work out the kinks and kind of figure out like if this is what you really want to do and just have the opportunity to try it. That's very, very awesome. And I think it's great that you guys have this, and I'm kind of jealous that I didn't probably be a little bit further along in my career if I had it. So no, just don't be afraid to make mistakes. Go back and rewatch everything that you do, take notes, learn from other broadcasters. If you see somebody on TV that you really, really like, take notes on what they do. And don't be afraid to fail, because you're probably going to suck at it for a little while until you get better. But as long as you're trying to improve 1%, I know that sounds like a Nick Saban thing, but as long as you're trying to get a little bit better every time you get on TV, you're going to realize pretty soon that you're pretty good at it. So don't be afraid to fail. Keep reading and just have fun with it. And the more you learn to do the things that you're supposed to do, the sooner you'll realize that you'll be able to do the things that you want to do. So.
Right. I'm going to backtrack just a tad, but I remember what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
That World Series, the first one you did, was that the Cubs Indians in 2016?
So it's probably a good thing that I didn't cover that World Series because I was actually in Chicago for some of it. Didn't go to the games. I actually went to Chicago with my ex-girlfriend after like a year. Adulthood is a weird thing. Don't ever grow up. But no, it was the Dodgers Red Sox, gotcha. I believe. So like when game 5 or 6 went into like 18 innings, like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and Max Muncy finally hit a walk-off home run. It was like a 2-1 game. So that was like my first welcome to journalism moment of like, oh, you have a story written out? Okay, well, this game is going to go for 7.5 hours. Your story is now meaningless. Start over at 2:00 in the morning.
Right. So, I think that's it today. So, for myself and you, Jake Rose, my guest, thank you for joining us for the second episode of in 2021, or second episode in 2021, excuse me, of the Pro Show on the Grizzly Cub Network. And thank you, Jake.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, and go Grizz.
Go Grizz. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.